My boyfriend was transferred to the office where I worked, and that's how we met. I was in a senior position, so I couldn't be too informal with him at work, but I quickly realized he was a cheerful and humorous person. We interacted a few times at formal dinners, and that made me fall for him. One day, I bluntly asked for his number, and that's how we started talking. I had already fallen for him and was looking for a relationship, but I wanted to know how he felt about me first. We started hanging out, and I became even more impressed by him. This allowed us to get to know each other better. A few weeks later, he asked me out on a date. I instantly said yes, and our first date was the best day of my life. After dating for about 2 months, I suggested he move in with me so we could maintain a professional distance at the office, and because I craved to be around him. We moved in together, and we felt like the most compatible couple in the world. He was such a decent and caring man who worried about the silliest things, making him even cuter. We always made sure to make each other feel special and did anything to make the other happy. My family consisted of my mom and a younger brother who lived in the same city, while his parents lived in his hometown. He had met my family several times, and they loved him as much as I did. Since his parents lived far away, I never got a chance to see them, but they knew he was dating someone from his office. My boyfriend told me his parents were strict and protective, so it wouldn't be easy for me to impress them. I told him I had genuine feelings for him and respected his family, no matter what they were like. On my birthday, my boyfriend proposed to me, and I couldn't say no. I promptly said yes and hugged him with all my might. He told me he wanted to marry me in 2 months, and I told him I was absolutely ready. He'd had to see his parents to tell them about us getting married, so he left for his hometown the weekend. When my boyfriend came back, he looked worried and told me his family was not convinced at all. His parents were furious because he hadn't involved them or discussed it with them before proposing to me. I told him we could go and convince them. Maybe they would like me if they got to know me. My boyfriend called his parents and told them I wanted to see them, to which his mom replied she had no desire to see me and he could do whatever suited him. My boyfriend once again went to see his parents to try to get their approval, but they didn't even talk to him properly. They felt they weren't being valued and thought their son had been hypnotized because he had never made decisions on his own. My boyfriend returned and told me he didn't care about what his parents wanted because he was sure of his choice. He told me we were going to get married and didn't need his parents' approval. We started wedding preparations, but my mom was concerned and said my in-laws could create problems later in my life. I told her I trusted my boyfriend and that if he was taking a stand, I should support him instead of adopting him. We got married in a small, intimate event that included our close friends and my family. I was the happiest bride, and I bet my husband felt like the luckiest groom. We planned to announce our wedding to my husband's parents after returning from our honeymoon. A week later, we left for our honeymoon and had the best time together. When we got back, my mom told us we had to announce our marriage to his family soon, as delaying would only make things worse. My husband called his parents and told them we got married a couple of weeks ago and couldn't wait to see them. They responded by saying that since he chose another family over them, he could stay with that family because they would never accept him as their son. This worried my husband a lot, and his parents still weren't responding to his calls. A week later, my in-laws finally responded but still spoke rudely. My husband told them he was old enough to make his own life decisions and didn't need their support or approval all the time. His parents threatened to abandon him and never let him see them again if he kept acting this way. Then they invited us to their home, which made my husband glad they were at least willing to see us. I'm not getting a positive vibe from this situation. Just a few days before, his parents were cursing me and saying I had hypnotized their son. Now they're inviting us to their home. I asked my husband what if they had planned something against us. He replied that I was overthinking and making up situations in my mind because I was mentally exhausted. My mom also told me they were just trying to make up with their son, as they couldn't lose their only child. We reached my mother-in-law's house in the evening, and they had arranged a lavish dinner. They greeted us warmly, told me I was beautiful, and said they were glad to see me. I was relieved that they accepted us as a couple and believed they would like me once they got to know me. I was convinced they were just being protective of their son, but my mother-in-law started asking about my family. When I mentioned I had a mom and a brother, she asked if my dad had died. I explained that my parents had separated long ago due to my dad's trust issues. She bluntly said that if my dad had doubted my mom, there must have been a reason. Ignoring her remark, she went on to say that women with such character ruin families. I lost my cool and yelled at her, asking how she dared to say that. My husband tried to calm me down, but I told him I wanted a divorce right away. We left immediately, and I locked myself in my room once we got home. My husband called my mom to talk to me, and she convinced me to open the door. You might think I overreacted, but I know how my mom dealt with her toxic relationship with my dad and how hard she worked to raise me and my brother. I couldn't bear a single word against her. My mom told me not to worry about someone who doesn't matter and to focus on my husband, who is by my side. After my mom left, my husband apologized for his mom's behavior, but said I shouldn't have asked for a divorce on the spot as it hurt him. He assured me he wouldn't talk to his parents until they apologized. A week later, my mother-in-law called my husband and wanted to see him. He refused, saying he wouldn't visit until she apologized. She lost her temper and accused him of being the worst son for disrespecting his parents who had sacrificed so much for him. He told her they weren't entitled to control his life and needed to apologize or risk losing him. After that call, his mom kept texting, accusing me of trying to take him away from his family. I took my husband's phone, called her, and warned her to stop or face consequences. She can respond, but continued texting him to show him what kind of person I was. A few days later, my father-in-law called and apologized for the mess, admitting my mother-in-law wouldn't accept me at any cost. He said he was embarrassed by her comments about my mom and wished he could have intervened. My husband told him he understood and had no issues with him. My father-in-law asked to see my husband, and he agreed to visit on the weekend. When my husband went to see his dad, everything was fine until my mother-in-law appeared. She told my husband she would only accept me on one condition. I could never see my mom again because she believed my mom was a bad influence. This enraged my husband. He told her that if she kept being so mean, he would stop seeing her. He warned her that if she didn't mind her own business, she would end up alone. I was amazed to see my husband take such a strong stand for me and my mom. Not caring about our marriage in the face of such an insult to my mom showed his strong character. He stood by my side, refusing to let anyone belittle my mom. Dealing with my mother-in-law was challenging. She was obsessed with her son and self-absorbed, unable to see anyone else in his life. She thought she owned his life because she had raised him. My husband and I both stood up to her rudeness because she couldn't understand love and respect. My husband, 37, and I, 34, have been together for 4 years and married for 2. He has a deceased son from a previous relationship, and I have a son from my former marriage. He and my son, 16, get along fine, but don't spend a lot of time together. My husband says it's because of school, activities, friends, and homework, but I believe if he really tried, he could find the time. My husband visits his son's grave every week, spending a couple of hours there with his phone off. Last week was his son's death anniversary, and my son had a football match. I told my husband it was a perfect opportunity to spend quality time with my son. He said he had already talked to my son, who wanted to go with his friends instead. I suggested we all go together, but he insisted my son should have time with his friends, and he had to visit his son's grave on the anniversary. I figured since we had already celebrated at home, the visit wasn't necessary. He got offended, insisting that visiting the grave was essential, especially on that day. An argument ensued, and I ended up telling him he should make an effort to spend more time with his stepson. He said his son matters too, and that unless I'd lost a child, I wouldn't understand. This upset me because it felt like he was implying I didn't love my stepson as my own and was using it against me in the argument. He left and refused to answer my calls. When my son came home, I vented to him. He told me I was wrong and shouldn't be too hard on his stepdad, who clearly has a lot going on. He said he thinks I'm overreacting and being paranoid for nothing. He assured me that his stepdad does give him time and attention, but that doesn't mean they have to spend every moment together. I don't know. Despite thinking I was hard on him, I feel like he's not making a real effort to spend more time with my son. My son probably said what he did just to get me off his back, but I'm not sure and need outside opinions on this matter. I am a 20-year-old woman, and my 35-year-old sister-in-law recently asked me to dye my hair back to a natural color because my 14-year-old niece wants to dye hers like mine. I have bright blue hair and love it. I've always been drawn to the alternative style and never saw an issue until now. My niece and I are close probably because I'm an adult closer to her age. She's taken an interest in how I dress, looking up to me and drawing inspiration from me while figuring herself out. I think this is sweet. Sadly, her mother seems to have a different opinion. My niece recently started asking for some streaks in her hair, and I guess her constant attempts to convince her parents have annoyed her mother. My niece's color of choice is the same shade of blue as mine, which is why my sister-in-law is now targeting me. One day, she messaged me asking me to tone down my look because it was influencing her daughter. She said she was worried people would think her daughter was a degenerate like many kids in our generation. Obviously, I took this as an insult, because if having colorful hair means you're a degenerate, that's what my sister-in-law thinks of me. I politely told her I wasn't comfortable changing my appearance just because she wanted me to. I tried to explain that my niece was trying to become her own person. My sister-in-law got quite mad that I wasn't going to change. According to my husband, she's always had issues with being told no. She told me that as an adult in her child's life, I should want what's best for her child, and that I'm a terrible aunt and role model if I let people judge her child for copying my punkish look. I was highly offended. I love my niece, blood or not, and I like to think I'm a good role model. I try my hardest to be someone she can look up to and come to when she needs help. But apparently my blue hair makes me a bad aunt. I told my sister-in-law that my job was to be a loving support system, not necessarily a role model, and that she should talk to her daughter about what she really wants instead of attacking me. My sister-in-law got even madder and said my niece wouldn't be allowed to come over as often until I stopped dressing like a degenerate. I'm heartbroken that my niece can't come over as often now, but I don't want to change who I am. My husband supports me, but my mother-in-law says I'm being in a hole. Ah, yes, nothing convinces a teenage girl to conform like refusing to indulge even the smallest expression of individuality. Keep doing you. I have a feeling there's more to your niece looking up to you than just the smaller age gap. Even if you change your hair color, I'll bet there are kids at school that your niece sees every day with wild hair colors. These days, everyone seems to be coloring their hair non-natural colors, and they look great. I know a 70-plus-year-old woman with purple and blue streaks in her hair who lectures at church on Sundays, too. Hair color is less permanent than piercings. Your sister-in-law is just being silly if she thinks dyeing